On my channel, I help you let go of your past limiting beliefs so that you can enter a new phase in your life, a creative phase where you're making the life that you want for yourself. I do this by applying ancient myths, stories, allegories, and philosophical ideas in a way that's very individual to you. I'm going to explain Easter in a way that applies to you on a very individual level. Easter, just like every other holiday and every single phenomenon that happens, whether in the stars or anything in general, always applies to you. Everything is a drama and a story of the psychological things that goes on in your own mind and in your experience every single day as a human being. Easter is no different. Easter is simply an expression, a physical expression and a thing that happens to explain what happens to you. Easter is closely tied with the story of Jesus Christ as well. And this also has a lot to do with you on an individual level. And so in this video, I'm going to explain how it ties in with you, what it has to do with what goes on in your everyday experience, and what it has to do with manifestation, letting go of your past, and creating the life that you want for yourself. So to understand Easter, it's important to understand the seasons. Now, each season itself represents something that happens within you as well. So in your consciousness, in your everyday experience, you go through seasons all the time. When you feel like there's no hope and you feel like things are just going bad for you and there's nothing you can do, this can be characterized as the winter time in your life, where you have aspirations, you have seeds, and you have ideas of things you want to do and want to accomplish. Maybe you want to be a better person. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to do something. But it seems like everything you're doing is just not working. This is winter time. This is death. And it's death because nothing grows at this time. There's no leaves on the trees. No seeds are allowed to sprout. It's too cold for anything to happen. You're frozen, and in other words, you're stuck. That's what winter represents, and that's what ice represents, death. Because it is dark. It is the darkest time of the year, winter. So we have dark times in our life. And this happens in cycles, just like it does every single year. You don't have a year that goes by without experiencing winter. And I'm from Florida, so we have a metaphorical winter, but still, it gets kind of cold, but it doesn't snow. But it's the symbol itself that we're looking at. And this is why on December 25th, we celebrate Christmas, because it represents the birth of the sun, or the birth of consciousness, a moving away from death, a moving away of being stuck, of the frozen wasteland. Because on December 25th, the sun moves. It moves towards the equinox and towards spring. So December 23rd and 24th are the longest nights that you can experience during the year. I made a whole video about Christmas, so if you haven't seen it, check it out on my channel. It talks about how Christmas has to do with you on an individual level, so you can check that one out. It's full of symbolism and it's heavy with ideas pertaining to yourself and your consciousness as well. So as the sun moves from December 25th, eventually we reach March 21st, which is the spring equinox. Now what happens is the sun crosses over this invisible line called the equator. Now it crosses over, and then we're heading into Easter now. Now what spring represents, what the spring equinox represents, is a crossing over, or Passover in other words. You're passing over from the darkness, the frozen wasteland, into new life. And this is why Easter is celebrated in spring. It represents a new life, a springing forth, something fresh, something new. Where all of the seeds that were frozen, when you felt stuck, all of the thoughts, beliefs, and aspirations you had are now sprouting into something. The sun is gaining more life, it's gaining more strength, and this represents the consciousness you have within yourself. Now, Easter itself is very striking because it's not on the same day, it's not a fixed day like Christmas is. So the spring represents the springing forth of your ideas, and summer represents the time in the season where the sun is the strongest, or enlightenment, where the sun is ruling now, and this is when you have the longest days, is the summertime, where the sun doesn't go down till 9 p.m. in some places. So the summertime represents life. It represents heat. The opposite of what winter represents, which is death. It represents movement. It represents being alive and abundant. And then after summer, you have fall, which is the fall of the sun, fall of consciousness, and then the cycle starts all over again. So the seasons themselves represents how we have those ups and downs. Everything happens in cycles. We have a cycle of life. We're young, we grow old, and then we die. Now, going back to spring, it's very striking that Easter is on a different day every single year. For example, Christmas is on December 25th. It's always on December 25th. But Easter is not like that. And most people don't actually know why that is. And the reason it is because there has to be a full moon first before Easter can happen. So it's very specific. So first, spring has to come, which is March 21st. Then, after spring happens, there needs to be a full moon at some point. There has to be a full moon while the sun is in the constellation of Aries. Now, Aries starts spring. So one of my favorite illustrations that makes the mind easy to understand, looking at your mind as a garden and looking at thoughts and ideas as seeds. Because when you do this, you can copy and paste it to the seasons themselves. So your mind is the field. It's a blank slate and it takes in seeds from everywhere. Impressions, whether they're from outside, from people, from social media, or any avenue you get impressions. Anything can be an impression. Somebody can come up and tell you something, and then that can give you a thought and an idea. So those ideas are allowed to sprout in your mind if left unattended. You can also plant seeds in your own mind as well. You are the farmer in this garden. You are the farmer of this field. This blank field doesn't discriminate from good or bad ideas, from an apple seed or a cherry seed. It'll take whatever comes in, just like an actual field. And if a field is left unattended, it'll just collect a bunch of seeds and then a bunch of weeds will grow, and then whatever will just grow, and it'll be a free-for-all. The constellation of Aries is symbolic in of itself. This has a direct parallel to Jesus Christ being called the Lamb of God, because the sun is considered the thing that melts the snow. Now, when snow melts, this allows seeds to come out of the snow that have been frozen. Or in other words, it allows thoughts and ideas to become a reality in your life that were otherwise frozen and stuck in time. The symbol for Aries is a lamb. And so this is where you have the connection. So as you let go of your past identity, as you let go of who you used to be, you give birth into somebody new. You're no longer stuck in the past. You're moving forward. You're springing forward, in other words. Symbolically, what the full moon means before Easter is fullness. It represents a feeling of being complete. It's the first full moon in the season of Aries. The left hemisphere of your brain is characterized by the sun. The right side of your brain is characterized by the moon. The left being masculine, the right being feminine. Now, the full moon being full means that your imaginative faculty, your creative side, is complete. So you have completed the process of becoming new, in other words, metaphorically, symbolically. And even the moon itself has cycles. So this is all something that continues to happen every single day in our lives. And this is why the Bible mentions we die to ourselves every single day. Easter is as old as time. And this is because Easter is directly tied with the cosmos, with the movements of the stars, the movements of the moon and the sun. These things are attached to Earth itself. So it doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter what you're actually putting on it. It's going to be the same thing. Easter is closely related to Jesus Christ. But before that, it had to do with the tradition of Tammuz and Ishtar. The difference is with having to do with Jesus Christ, back in ancient times, it had to do with a person named Tammuz. And it represents the same thing across all cultures. It has the same thing to do with yourself and the symbols themselves, because the symbols are everlasting and they cross cultural barriers themselves. You become new as you let go of the old. You enter spring when you leave winter. I'm going to explain how this works regarding manifestation, because it all connects. If you're not familiar with how manifestation works, I'm going to explain how it works very basically. So essentially, you want to focus your attention on something. And once you focus your attention on that thing, if you are an expert at drawing your attention and you can focus on one thing, this thing will consume your mind. And then it will be as though it is completed already, therefore manifesting in your life. You can apply this to any avenue. You can apply this to anything you want in your life. You can convince yourself that you're the greatest person ever, or you can convince yourself that you are not. It depends. Now, when you think of something attentively and you want to change something about yourself, you have a new image you want to uphold, what you do is focus your attention on this. This is the process of death and resurrection. Now, when the sun crosses over the equator, this is known as the equinox, the crossover, or the Passover. This is the mental phenomenon that happens when you fix your attention on who you would like to be. Or in other words, you crucify your thought into your mind, you paste it, you create a strong image of it. So now you cross over from the cold of winter into spring now. Now, once you reach Easter, it becomes the fulfillment of that wish desired. The full moon has to be present before Easter can come. Now, the reason this is like this when it comes to you is because there has to be that feeling, that full feeling within you. This image has to be pasted, it has to be crucified before it's allowed to resurrect. So the symbolism here being you must fix your attention on what you desire to be. Then through the process, your old self dies and then the new version of yourself is allowed to be resurrected. And that is the story of Easter. This is why Easter has a bunch of eggs and a bunch of rabbits, because it just represents new life, birth, resurrection, new things coming into existence. And the reason rabbits specifically because they're associated with fertility. Now, this happens all the time in our mind as well. Our mind gives birth to ideas and beliefs all the time. Fertility has always been something to represent also mental processes. Because if you have an idea that you want to accomplish, if you have something that you want, but you cannot get it out, that would be considered infertile, an infertile idea or thought. Your mind has to be a breeding ground of things that you want for yourself so they can exist in real life or manifest, in other words. And you can only do this while the sun is out or you're consciously aware. You cannot do this in the winter. You can't do this in the darkness. This is why usually they say when it rains, it pours. When you're in darkness, all you see is darkness and you're surrounded by terrible experiences and bad thoughts. You need to drive that out first before you can enter into the springtime. So as usual, the story always represents letting go of the past and entering into something new. That is the story and that will always be the story. It's about the story of ever evolving forwards and moving forwards. You're not supposed to stay stagnant. You're supposed to be moving towards the light. You're supposed to be evolving, becoming someone better, becoming somebody new. And this is what that means. This can be compared to with Alice in Wonderland as well, which also represents spiritual awakening and rebirth. Many times throughout the movie, Alice is changing her perspective on things. She grows and then she becomes smaller. This represents how we change every day in our lives as well. We change our perspectives. We change the way we see things. It represents the growth and transformation we carry all within ourselves. Alice's fall into Wonderland can be seen as a metaphor for awakening to new perspectives, very similar to how spring represents nature's awakening after winter. I also like how Wonderland can represent the imaginative side that we all have, where we have an abstract part of our mind. Wonderland is a place where nothing makes sense. There's no logic and things are just sideways. There's a Queen of Hearts, and then there's card people, and then there's a rabbit with a pocket watch, and then there's the Mad Hatter, and then the cat with the stripes. And everyone is so ominous and everyone is so weird in their own way. This is a perfect representation of our imagination and our creative faculties. And it also represents springtime where everything is just coming out at once. But in a spiritual sense, this movie just tells us how to encourage and embrace change within ourselves, moving from winter into spring. No matter how crazy things may seem and how out of the ordinary they may seem, you change your perspective because the perspective you have as your new self will be completely different than it is compared to your old self, your old limiting beliefs. It's about allowing yourself to grow past your own limitations, the limits that you thought were impossible to break. And that is breaking the ice, so to speak, or melting the cold, harsh winter ice away from your life. If you guys have any questions or any comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you guys have to the best of my ability. Like this video and subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.